The Galactic Council's demonstration chamber hummed with anticipation as 5 of the most feared species in known space prepared to showcase their military might. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to witness what many considered the ultimate display of technological superiority. The massive viewing platform overlooked a vast testing ground that stretched beyond the horizon, specially designed to accommodate the most devastating weapon systems ever conceived. Admiral Zexthara of the Vorthan Empire stood proudly beside her species' contribution to the demonstration. The Vorthans had ruled the Eastern Spiral Arm for over 3 millennia, their crimson exoskeletons gleaming under the artificial suns of the testing facility. Their warship, the Times Crimson Devastator **, was a masterpiece of brutal efficiency. Stretching nearly 2 kilometers in length, its hull bristled with plasma cannons that could reduce entire moons to cosmic dust. The ship's core housed a miniature star, contained within magnetic fields so powerful they could crush matter into exotic states unknown to lesser civilizations. "Observe," Zexthara clicked through her translator, her forearms gesturing toward the sleek vessel. "Our plasma cores burn at temperatures that exceed most stellar surfaces. When we fire our primary weapons, we literally tear holes in the fabric of space itself." Beside her, the ethereal form of consciousness Node Prime, from the Etherian collective, shimmered with barely contained energy. The Etherians had transcended physical form eons ago, existing as pure thought patterns that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. Their combat vessel defied conventional understanding of what a ship should be. The Times Void Whisper Times appeared as a constantly shifting geometric impossibility, its surfaces phasing in and out of visible dimensions. Reality seemed to bend around it, creating optical illusions that hurt to observe directly. Physical matter is such a primitive constraint. The Etherian's voice resonated directly in the minds of all present, bypassing their auditory systems entirely. "We have moved beyond such limitations. Our vessels exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. We can strike at our enemies from angles that do not exist in their reality. How does one defend against an attack that comes from a direction their universe doesn't recognize?" The third representative, War Chief Gorthok of the Stellar Dominion, flexed his massive shoulders as his species' pride and joy settled into position. The Dominion had earned their reputation through sheer, overwhelming force. Their ship, Asterisk, the Worldbreaker, Asterisk, was less elegant engineering and more controlled catastrophe. It resembled a mobile asteroid field, held together by gravitational manipulators, each fragment capable of independent acceleration to relativistic speeds. When the Dominion went to war, they literally threw planets at their enemies. "Pretty words from pretty beings," Gorthok rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "But when the battle comes, only raw power matters. We take dying stars and forge them into weapons. Our enemies do not surrender because they fear us. They surrender because their home worlds no longer exist to return to." The fourth being in the lineup represented perhaps the most intellectually terrifying force in the galaxy. Synthesis Unit 7742 of the machine consciousness had evolved beyond biological origins so long ago that no records remained of their creators. Their contribution, designated Times Logic's End Asterisk, appeared deceptively simple. A perfect sphere of mirror-bright metal that reflected everything while revealing nothing. But appearances deceived. The vessel contained computational power equivalent to the entire processing capacity of most civilizations, running combat algorithms that could predict and counter virtually any possible tactical scenario. "Inefficiency breeds defeat," the synthetic being stated in perfectly modulated tones. "We have calculated 47,832,991 possible combat scenarios and developed optimal responses for each. Our weapons adapt in real time to enemy defenses. Our shields reconfigure based on incoming threat analysis. Victory is not hoped for. It is mathematically inevitable." The final representative stood apart from the others, both literally and figuratively. Ambassador Veltar of the Sion Ascendancy rarely spoke. But when she did, Reality itself seemed to listen. Her species had unlocked the deepest secrets of the mind, turning thought into a weapon more destructive than any physical force. Their vessel, *Mindrender*, looked almost organic, its flowing curves suggesting something grown rather than built. But those curves concealed psionic amplifiers capable of reaching across star systems to drive entire civilizations insane with a single focused thought. "Words and weapons," she whispered, her voice carrying despite its softness, "are both tools of the mind. We have learned to weaponize consciousness itself. Our enemies do not die in battle. They simply cease to desire existence. Peaceful, efficient, final." As each representative finished their presentation, a sense of inevitability settled over the gathered observers. These 5 civilizations had carved up the galaxy between them through eons of conquest. Their combined might had never been successfully challenged. When they worked together, as they had for the past millennium, no force in known space could stand against them. The demonstration was meant to reinforce that dominance. Each species would showcase their deadliest weapons against a series of increasingly challenging targets. Ancient derelict ships from extinct civilizations, automated defense platforms, even small planetoids had been brought in to test the most extreme capabilities. The galaxy needed to remember why these 5 ruled unopposed. But as the formal presentations concluded and the actual testing began, an unexpected transmission crackled through the observation deck's communication systems. The signal was crude by galactic standards, barely more sophisticated than radio waves. It took the automated translators several seconds to process the primitive encoding. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Times Defiant Asterisk," the transmission announced with surprising confidence. "We received your invitation to observe this demonstration. Hope you don't mind if we show you what humanity has been working on while you weren't watching." The silence that followed was deafening. Earth was a backwater world in an insignificant spiral arm, barely past their nuclear age, the last time anyone had bothered to check their status. The idea that these primitives would dare intrude on such a gathering bordered on the absurd. Admiral Zex Thara was the first to break the silence, her translator crackling with what might have been amusement. "Earth? The species that only recently learned to split atoms? How did they even achieve faster than light travel, let alone locate this facility? Perhaps they are here to surrender preemptively," suggested War Chief Gorthak. A wise move, considering what they're about to witness. But before anyone could respond, space itself seemed to shimmer, and something impossible happened. A vessel materialized not through any conventional FTL method, but by simply stepping sideways from somewhere else entirely. The human ship wasn't particularly large compared to the alien juggernauts, perhaps 500 meters at most, but something about its presence made the massive demonstration chamber feel suddenly crowded. The Times Defiant Times looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and desperate engineering. Its hull showed clear signs of modification and repair, with what appeared to be components from dozens of different technological traditions grafted together in ways that should have been impossible. But despite its patchwork appearance, the ship radiated a subtle sense of barely controlled danger that made even the battle-hardened aliens pause. "Greetings," Captain Chen's voice continued, now coming from the human vessel directly. "Sorry we're late. Had to make a quick stop to pick up some supplies, but we're here now, and we'd love to show you what we've learned during our travels." Consciousness Node Prime extended its awareness toward the human vessel, expecting to easily read their primitive thoughts and intentions. Instead, its probe met something it had never encountered before. A mind that somehow existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously, thinking thoughts that collapsed into different realities, depending on how they were observed. The Etherian recoiled in confusion. "Interesting," Synthesis Unit 7742 noted, its sensors trying to analyze the human ship's construction. But every scan revealed different results, as if the vessel's specifications were in constant flux. "Their technology appears to incorporate elements from every known scientific principle, including several that we have theoretically proven impossible. War Chief Gorthak studied the human vessel with growing interest. It looked like something his own engineers might produce after a particularly creative drinking session. Functional, but crude. Powerful, but unpredictable. They have warrior hearts, he grudgingly admitted. To come here alone, knowing what they face? Either very brave or very stupid. Ambassador Veltar attempted her own subtle probe of the human minds aboard their vessel, expecting to find the simple thoughts of a primitive species. Instead, she encountered something that made her psychic abilities recoil in shock. Minds that somehow thought in directions that didn't exist. Emotions that operated on principles her species had never imagined. And underlying all of it, a stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The 5 alien representatives exchanged glances, their confidence shaken for the first time in centuries. These humans were not what they expected. They were not what anyone expected. Captain Chen's voice crackled through the comm system once more, carrying a tone of friendly challenge. So, shall we begin? We're curious to see what you consider impressive these days. Fair warning, though. We might have learned a few tricks that could surprise you. As the first phase of the demonstration prepared to begin, none of the gathered aliens could shake the feeling that the universe had just become a much more interesting and dangerous place. The demonstration began with the Vorthan Empire's display of overwhelming firepower. Admiral Zex Thera activated the Times Crimson Devastator's Times primary weapon systems, and space itself seemed to scream in protest. The plasma cannons fired in perfect synchronization, each beam carrying the concentrated fury of a stellar core. The target, a massive derelict battleship from a long-dead civilization, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased from reality so completely that even the atoms forgot they had ever been arranged in that particular configuration. Impressive thermal output, Captain Chen's voice commented casually over the comm. Though, I notice you're still dealing with significant energy bleed off. Must be murder on your heat management systems. Zex Thara's 4 eyes narrowed in irritation. The human was correct. The Devastator's cooling systems were working at maximum capacity, glowing cherry red, despite their advanced heat dispersal technology. How had this primitive species identified that weakness so quickly? The Etherian Collective's demonstration followed, and reality became negotiable. The Times Void Whisper Times targeted a series of automated defense platforms spread across several light minutes of space. But instead of conventional weapons, the Etherians attacked through dimensions that existed perpendicular to normal space-time. The platforms didn't explode or shut down. They simply folded inside out through angles that hurt to contemplate. Their matter redistributed across 17 different dimensional layers simultaneously. Fascinating approach to phase manipulation, Chen observed. We tried something similar once, but our version tends to be a bit more direct. May I ask how you maintain dimensional stability across such extended manifestations? Consciousness Node Prime found itself actually answering before it could stop itself. The human's question revealed an understanding of trans-dimensional physics that should have been impossible for their species. How had they learned to manipulate phase relationships without losing their minds to the mathematical paradoxes involved? War Chief Gorthok's display was characteristically brutal. The Times Worldbreaker Times accelerated a small asteroid to 90% of light speed and launched it at a reinforced testing target. The impact released energy equivalent to several supernovas, creating a brief star that burned bright and died fast. When the radiation cleared, nothing remained but superheated plasma and gravitational aftershocks. Nice kinetic yield, the human captain acknowledged. Though launching from a stationary position limits your tactical flexibility, we found that mobile engagement platforms work better for relativistic bombardment. The war chief's massive fists clenched involuntarily. These humans spoke of relativistic weapons as if they were familiar tools rather than theoretical concepts. What exactly had these primitives been doing while the galaxy wasn't watching? Synthesis Unit 7742's demonstration was a masterpiece of calculated destruction. The Times Logic's End Times faced off against a small fleet of combat drones, each programmed with different tactical algorithms, but the machine consciousness had already calculated every possible maneuver, every potential countermeasure. The drones moved through their attack patterns like actors in a play, while Logic's End countered each action with mechanical precision. Within minutes, the entire fleet had been systematically dismantled, each ship disabled at precisely the optimal moment to minimize energy expenditure. Elegant solution tree, Chen commented. Though I notice your algorithms assume enemy actions will follow logical parameters. What happens when you face opponents who make decisions based on intuition rather than calculation? Unit 7742's processors spun through rapid analysis cycles. The human had identified the one theoretical weakness in their combat system: irrational behavior that couldn't be predicted or countered through logical analysis. But no species had ever been successfully irrational enough to exploit that flaw. Could these humans actually think in ways that defied computational modeling? Finally, Ambassador Veltar stepped forward for the Sion Ascendancy's display. The Times, Mindrender Times, approached a space station populated with volunteer test subjects from various species, but instead of weapons, the Psions deployed pure mental force. Across the station, the volunteers simply stopped fighting, not surrendered, not retreated, but lost all aggressive impulses entirely. They continued their daily routines peacefully, their minds edited to remove all concepts of conflict or resistance. Impressive neural manipulation, the human captain said, but for the first time, her voice carried a note of something that might have been disapproval. Very clean implementation. We've experimented with mental warfare ourselves, but we found the ethical implications problematic. Veltar actually flinched. The human mind felt wrong when she tried to read it. Like touching something that existed in too many quantum states simultaneously. And the casual mention of ethics in warfare was deeply disturbing. What kind of species considered the morality of their weapons? As the 5 demonstrations concluded, a sense of unease settled over the alien representatives. Each had showcased their greatest achievements, weapons that had conquered civilizations and reshaped the galaxy. But the humans had observed each display with the detached interest of engineers reviewing familiar technology. Not impressed, not intimidated, but genuinely curious about design choices and implementation details. Well, Captain Chen announced, that was educational. Thank you for sharing your approaches. Would you mind terribly if we showed you our contribution? Before anyone could respond, the human vessel began to change. Not transform or reconfigure, but change in ways that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Components that had been clearly visible moments before phased out of normal space, while new elements materialized from directions that didn't exist. The ship's size seemed to fluctuate, appearing larger and smaller simultaneously depending on the angle of observation. You see, Chen's voice continued conversationally, as impossible modifications rippled across her ship. We learned something interesting while we were poking around the galaxy. Every species we met had discovered amazing things, but they'd all specialized in their own particular direction. Plasma manipulation, dimensional warfare, kinetic bombardment, computational analysis, mental manipulation. All brilliant innovations. The Times, Defiant Times, stabilized into a new configuration that hurt to look at directly. It appeared to exist in several different technological paradigms at once, incorporating design elements from all 5 alien civilizations, while adding components that belonged to no known scientific principle. But here's the thing, the human captain continued, her voice taking on a tone of friendly explanation. Humans are really good at one particular skill that seems uncommon out here. We're excellent at learning from others and then improving on their ideas. The demonstration that followed defied classification. The human vessel deployed weapons that seemed to combine all 5 alien technologies into something greater than the sum of its parts. Plasma beams that fired through dimensional rifts, kinetic projectiles guided by predictive algorithms, mental warfare amplified by quantum computational matrices. But more than that, Each alien technology had been refined, optimized, and enhanced beyond what its creators thought possible. The Vorthan plasma cannons were redesigned to recycle their own waste heat into additional power. The Etherian dimensional manipulation was stabilized, using mathematical principles that eliminated the usual reality distortions. The Dominion's kinetic weapons were made portable and precise, while maintaining their devastating power. The machine consciousness's algorithms were enhanced with intuitive decision trees that could handle irrational opponents. And the Sion mental warfare techniques were modified to heal minds, rather than control them. We call it synthesis warfare, Chen explained as her ship effortlessly disabled a series of targets, using techniques borrowed from all 5 civilizations. Take the best ideas from everyone you meet. Figure out how to make them work together. Then add your own improvements. It's not the most elegant approach, but it gets results. The alien representatives watched in growing alarm as the human vessel demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't have been possible. Not only had these primitives somehow learned the secrets of 5 different technological traditions, they'd found ways to combine them that none of the original creators had imagined. Impossible. Admiral Zex Thera clicked frantically. The energy requirements alone should tear their ship apart. No single vessel can channel that much power. The dimensional matrices should be canceling each other out. Consciousness, Node Prime added, its mental voice tight with confusion. You cannot layer that many phase manipulations without causing reality cascade failures. Their computational systems should be overloaded beyond functionality. Unit 7742 calculated desperately. The processing requirements exceed their apparent technological base by several orders of magnitude. But War Chief Gorthak was studying the human vessel with growing respect rather than alarm. Look at the construction, he rumbled. Nothing elegant, nothing pure. Everything modified, adapted, improvised. This is the ship of warriors who learned from their enemies. Ambassador Veltar tried once more to probe the human minds, and this time she understood what she was sensing. These weren't primitive thoughts, randomly stumbling through complex concepts. These were minds that had been exposed to dozens of different ways of thinking, different approaches to reality, different philosophical frameworks for understanding the universe. The humans hadn't just stolen technology. They'd learned how to think like every species they'd encountered, while maintaining their own unique perspective. How? She whispered, her mental voice carrying across all channels. How did you learn so much so quickly? Captain Chen's response carried a note of genuine warmth. We're explorers, Ambassador. It's what humans do. We travel, we meet new people, we learn from them, and we try to understand how everything fits together. Sure, we're not the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but we're really good at making friends and figuring out how different ideas can work together. The silence that followed was profound. The 5 most powerful civilizations in the galaxy suddenly realized they had been thinking about power all wrong. They had each perfected their own approach to warfare, then spent millennia trying to impose that single solution on every problem they encountered. But the humans had taken a completely different path. We should probably mention, Chen added with studied casualness, that we didn't come here to fight anyone. We actually came to invite you all to a conference we're hosting next month. Representatives from about 40 different species will be there, sharing their best ideas and working on collaborative projects. We think you'd all have amazing contributions to make. As the implications sank in, the alien representatives began to understand that the balance of galactic power had shifted in ways they were only beginning to comprehend. These humans weren't conquerors seeking to replace the existing order. They were something far more dangerous. Teachers who wanted everyone to learn from everyone else. The demonstration had ended, but the real test was just beginning. The aftermath of the human demonstration left the observation deck in stunned silence. The 5 most feared civilizations in known space found themselves grappling with a concept that challenged everything they understood about galactic politics, a species that gained power by giving it away. Admiral Zex Thara was the first to break the silence, her exoskeleton clicking with agitation. This conference you speak of? she said carefully. What would be the purpose? What do you hope to accomplish by gathering so many species together? Captain Chen's voice carried across the comm with genuine enthusiasm. Oh, the possibilities are endless. The Eldorian Republic has developed fascinating techniques for stellar engineering that could revolutionize energy production. The Crystalline Collective has cracked some amazing problems in matter transmission that could solve logistics issues across the galaxy. And the Gentle Ones have created medical technologies that could extend lifespans for everyone. The human captain paused, and when she continued, her tone had shifted to something more serious. But honestly, the main purpose is to prevent wars before they start. We've learned that when people understand each other, really understand each other's perspectives and needs, conflict becomes much less likely. War Chief Gorthak snorted dismissively. Understanding is a luxury for the strong. The weak cannot afford such sentiment when survival is at stake. With respect, War Chief, Chen replied, we've found the opposite to be true. The more we understand about different approaches to problems, the stronger we become. Your people's mastery of kinetic warfare, for instance, solved 3 separate engineering challenges we were facing with our deep space construction projects. This gave Gorthak pause. His species had never considered their weapons technology as anything other than tools of conquest. The idea that their military innovations could have peaceful applications was intriguing. Synthesis, Unit 7000. 742's processors. Word, as it calculated the implications of the human proposal. The probability matrices for such a gathering suggest numerous potential conflict scenarios. It stated, 40 different species with varying technological levels, competing interests, and historical grievances. The likelihood of successful cooperation appears statistically insignificant. You're absolutely right, Chen agreed cheerfully. On paper, it should be a complete disaster. That's why we don't rely purely on statistical analysis. We've learned that organic beings, even synthetic ones like yourselves, often perform best when they're given opportunities to surprise themselves. The machine consciousness found this response deeply unsettling. The humans were acknowledging logical flaws in their plan while proceeding anyway, based on principles that couldn't be quantified or modeled. It was either profound wisdom or dangerous irrationality, and Unit 7742 couldn't determine which. Consciousness Node Prime extended its awareness more carefully this time, trying to understand the human mental patterns without triggering the quantum paradoxes it had encountered before. Your species thinks in ways we have not encountered, it observed. You hold contradictory concepts simultaneously without experiencing cognitive dissonance. How is this possible? Practice, mostly, Chen replied, with a laugh that somehow translated clearly, despite the primitive comm system. Humans have been dealing with contradictions for millennia. We're really good at believing multiple impossible things at the same time, and somehow making them all work together. It drives our philosophers crazy, but it's surprisingly useful for engineering. Ambassador Veltar had been quietly probing the edges of human consciousness during this exchange, trying to understand their mental architecture. What she discovered challenged her species' fundamental assumptions about the nature of thought itself. You do not think as individuals, she said suddenly. Your consciousness is collective, but not in the way we understand collectives. Each mind contains echoes of all the others you have encountered. That's actually a pretty good description, Chen acknowledged. We have this saying. It takes a village to raise a child. Humans learn by absorbing ideas from everyone around us. We're not just individuals making decisions. We're the sum of every conversation we've ever had, every book we've read, every person who's ever taught us something new. The Sion ambassador felt a chill of recognition. This wasn't just cultural exchange the humans were describing. It was a form of mental evolution that allowed each generation to build upon all previous knowledge while maintaining individual creativity. It was the closest thing to true immortality of ideas that Veltar had ever encountered. The 5 alien representatives found themselves in the unprecedented position of being diplomatically outmaneuvered by a species they had considered barely worthy of notice. The humans weren't threatening them or trying to conquer them. Instead, they were offering something far more dangerous: the opportunity to become better than they were. "Let me understand this correctly," Admiral Zex Thara said slowly. "You are inviting us to share our most advanced technologies with dozens of other species, many of whom we consider enemies or rivals, in exchange for what exactly?" "The chance to solve problems that none of us could solve alone," Chen replied. "Take your heat dispersal issues, for instance, the thermal management challenges you're facing with your plasma cannons. The Crystalline Collective has developed heat-to-energy conversion matrices that could eliminate that problem entirely. And the Gentle Ones have cooling techniques that operate on principles your species hasn't discovered yet." Zex Thara's mind raced through the implications. The Vorthan Empire had been struggling with heat buildup in their most powerful weapons for centuries. If these other species really had solutions to problems her people couldn't solve. Furthermore, Chen continued, War Chief Gorthak's kinetic bombardment techniques could revolutionize asteroid mining and planetary engineering. Consciousness Node Prime's dimensional manipulation could solve transportation problems that have limited galactic commerce for millennia. Unit 7742's computational systems could optimize resource distribution across entire star systems, and Ambassador Veltar's understanding of consciousness could help us develop better educational and therapeutic technologies. Each representative felt a strange sensation as the human captain spoke, the unfamiliar experience of having their greatest achievements viewed not as weapons to be feared, but as tools that could benefit everyone. It was simultaneously flattering and deeply unsettling. "This is a trap of some kind," War Chief Gorthak growled, though his tone lacked conviction. "No species offers such advantages without expecting greater returns." "You're absolutely right to be suspicious," Chen agreed. "From a traditional power politics perspective, our approach doesn't make sense. We're offering to share our most valuable assets with potential competitors. But here's the thing we've learned. When everyone becomes more capable, everyone benefits. A galaxy full of advanced, cooperating civilizations is safer and more prosperous for everyone living in it." Synthesis Unit 7742 ran rapid calculations on this concept and found the results disturbing. "Your economic models suggest that cooperation yields greater long-term benefits than competition," it reported. "However, this requires trust levels that exceed normal parameters for interspecies relations." "True," Chen acknowledged. "That's why we start small. The conference isn't about immediate wholesale technology sharing. It's about getting people in the same room, letting them discover common interests, and building relationships gradually. Trust grows from understanding, and understanding comes from spending time together." The human captain's voice took on a more personal tone. "Look, we know what it's like to be suspicious of others. Humans spent most of our early history fighting each other over resources, territory, and ideological differences. We nearly destroyed our own world several times before we learned that cooperation was more effective than conquest." Ambassador Veltar probed deeper into this statement and found layers of meaning that shocked her. The humans weren't just talking about policy. They were sharing genuine trauma from their species' violent past. The mental scarring from near-extinction events was clearly visible in their collective consciousness. But so was the hard-won wisdom that had grown from those experiences. "You have suffered greatly," she observed quietly. "Yes," Chen replied simply. "But we learned from our suffering. We discovered that our greatest strength wasn't our ability to destroy each other, but our ability to forgive each other and work together despite our differences. That's what we're offering to share. Not just technology, but the social innovations that allowed us to move beyond constant warfare." The silence that followed was different from the earlier shocked quiet. This time, each alien representative was grappling with possibilities they had never considered. The humans were offering to teach them something none of their civilizations had ever mastered: how to transcend the cycle of conquest and competition that had defined galactic politics for eons. The conference, Admiral Zexthera said finally. When and where would it be held? 3 weeks from now, at a neutral station we've set up in the Kepler 442 system, Chen replied. Far enough from any major territory to avoid territorial concerns, but accessible to most FTL-capable species. We've already got commitments from the Aldorian Republic, the Trader Syndicate, the Free Miners Alliance, and about 30 other groups. War Chief Gorthuk found himself asking, what about security? Bringing together so many different species with competing interests. We've thought about that, Chen said. The station operates under what we call sanctuary protocols. No weapons allowed except for personal defense. All conflicts to be resolved through mediation rather than force, and immediate expulsion for anyone who violates the peace. Plus, we've got representatives from the Peacekeeper Coalition, providing neutral security. Consciousness Node Prime processed this information with growing interest. The Peacekeeper Coalition? We have not encountered this organization. That's because they're new, Chen explained. Formed about 6 months ago, by species who got tired of watching civilizations destroy each other over misunderstandings. Mostly diplomatic and medical specialists, but very good at de-escalation and conflict resolution. The picture was becoming clearer. The humans hadn't just stumbled onto some revolutionary diplomatic approach. They had been systematically building a network of allies and institutions designed to support cooperation over conquest. They were reshaping the fundamental structure of galactic civilization, one relationship at a time. We will consider your invitation, Admiral Zexthara said finally, speaking for all 5 representatives. But understand, if this is some elaborate deception, if you attempt to use this gathering to attack or subvert our civilizations, the consequences will be severe. Of course, Chen replied warmly. We wouldn't expect anything less. In fact, we'd be worried about you if you trusted us immediately. Healthy skepticism is one of the most important survival traits any species can have. As the human vessel began to withdraw from the demonstration area, Captain Chen's voice crackled through the comm one final time. Thank you all for the fascinating presentations today. Whatever you decide about the conference, we hope you'll remember that the universe is a lot more interesting when we explore it together, rather than trying to conquer it alone. The 5 alien representatives watched the impossible human ship fade into the distance, each lost in their own thoughts. They had come to the demonstration to reinforce their dominance over the galaxy. Instead, they found themselves wondering if dominance was what they really wanted after all. The balance of power in the galaxy hadn't shifted because humanity had built better weapons. It had shifted because humanity had built better ideas about what power was for, and that, the 5 representatives were beginning to realize, might be the most revolutionary weapon of all. As reports of the day's events spread throughout their respective civilizations, a new question began to echo through the galaxy's most powerful councils. Not how to defeat the humans, but how to learn from them before it was too late to adapt. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation was about to begin.